I didn't expect the moment I asked my bodyguard for a massage to change the way I saw him, or myself. Started off as a joke. At least that's what I told myself. My name's Colin, I'm 27, and for the past year, my life has been complicated. Not in a dramatic movie-style way, just the kind of complicated where money, attention, and expectations quietly pile up until you can't breathe without feeling watched. That's where Daniel came in. Daniel was hired 6 months ago after a minor incident, paparazzi getting too close, someone following me a little too persistently. Nothing insane, but enough for my manager to insist I needed professional protection. Enter Daniel. He was exactly what you'd expect at first glance. Tall, broad shoulders, calm eyes that didn't miss anything. He didn't talk much, didn't smile often, and carried himself like he was always 2 steps ahead of everyone in the room. At first, I hated having him around. Felt invasive. Having someone constantly nearby, watching, listening, it made even simple things like going out for coffee feel staged. But over time, I got used to him. More than that, I started noticing things. The way he'd subtly position himself between me and strangers. The way his voice dropped when he spoke directly to me, never rude, always controlled. And the weirdest part? He never looked at me the way others did. No curiosity, no judgment, no interest. Just focus. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made me want to get a reaction out of him. That's probably where all of this really began. That day had been exhausting. Back-to-back meetings, a shoot that ran longer than expected, and a headache that had been building behind my eyes since noon. By the time I got home, my entire body felt tight, like I'd been holding tension for hours without realizing it. I dropped my keys on the counter and loosened my shirt, rolling my shoulders with a quiet groan. Long day. Daniel's voice came from behind me. I hadn't even heard him enter. I turned slightly, leaning back against the kitchen island. That obvious? He gave a small nod, eyes scanning me briefly, not in a personal way, just assessing. You're tense. I let out a short laugh. That's one way to put it. There was a pause. He stayed where he was, arms relaxed at his sides, posture straight but not stiff, waiting like he always did for the next instruction, the next movement. And for some reason, I didn't want him to just stand there. Hey, I said, tilting my head slightly. You ever give massages? The second the words left my mouth, I almost took them back. Not because it was inappropriate, well, maybe a little, but because of how normal it sounded. Like I'd asked him to grab me a glass of water. Daniel didn't react immediately. His eyes flicked to mine, steady, unreadable. I'm not a therapist, he said after a moment. I didn't say you were, I replied, shrugging lightly. But you look like you know what you're doing. That earned the smallest pause. Not a smile, not even close, but something shifted, just slightly. I have basic training, he admitted. For injuries. Perfect, I said, pushing off the counter. I'm injured, emotionally, physically, spiritually. That almost got a reaction. Almost. He exhaled quietly, like he was debating whether to entertain me or shut it down completely. You're serious? He asked. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yeah, I said more quietly. I am. The room felt different after that. Less like a joke, more like something else entirely. Daniel studied me for a moment longer, like he was trying to figure out if this crossed a line. If I was crossing a line. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. Sit down, he said. Simple. Direct. My stomach did something weird at the tone. I turned and sat on the edge of the couch, suddenly very aware of everything, my posture, my breathing, the way my shirt clung slightly to my back. I heard him move behind me, felt it more than anything. Relax your shoulders, he said. Easier said than done. But I tried. And then his hands touched me. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden spark, no exaggerated reaction. Just warmth. His hands were firm, steady, pressing into the tension like he knew exactly where to go without asking. Not rough, not gentle, controlled. Professional. But still, I exhaled slowly, my head dipping forward slightly as his fingers worked into the tight muscles near my neck. "Jesus," I muttered under my breath. "You're very tense," he said, like it was an observation, not a comment. "Yeah, I gathered that." His thumbs pressed deeper, and I had to bite back a reaction. Felt too good. And that was the problem. Because suddenly, I wasn't thinking about my headache anymore. I was thinking about him, about how close he was, about the way his hands moved, precise, deliberate, confident, about the fact that this was Daniel. The same guy who barely spoke unless necessary, who kept a careful distance from everything and everyone. And now he was touching me like this. "Better?" he asked. His voice was closer now, lower. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said quietly. "A lot better." There was a brief pause. His hands didn't move away. Instead, they shifted slightly lower, slower this time, tracing the tension along my shoulders in a way that felt less clinical, more aware. I felt it immediately, that shift. And judging by the slight hesitation in his movement, so did he. Neither of us said anything, but the air between us had changed, and I had a feeling this wasn't going to stay just a massage for long. I should have stopped it there. That would have been the smart thing to do. Just enjoy the moment, let him finish, say thanks, and move on like nothing happened. But I didn't, because the second I felt that shift in his touch, I wanted more of it, and I knew he felt it too. Daniel's hands slowed slightly, like he was recalibrating, deciding whether to keep going or pull back. That control of his, it wasn't just physical. It was in everything he did. But this time, it slipped. Just a little. "Lean forward," he said quietly. I did, resting my forearms on my knees, exposing more of my back without really thinking about it. Or maybe I was thinking about it. His fingers pressed into my shoulders again, deeper now, working down along my spine. The pressure made me exhale slowly, my eyes drifting shut. "Where did you learn this?" I asked, mostly to break the silence. "Training," he replied. "Field work. You learn how to deal with muscle strain." "Remind me to get injured more often," I murmured. That earned a subtle reaction. Not a laugh. But his hands paused for half a second, then continued. The room was quiet except for my breathing and the soft shift of fabric every time he moved. And the more time passed, the harder it was to ignore what was happening. Not just physically, but mentally. I was hyper-aware of him, of how close he was standing between my legs, of the heat of his body just inches from mine, of the way his hands moved, not rushed, not hesitant anymore, just steady, confident, like he'd made a decision. My fingers tightened slightly against my knees. "Daniel," I said, my voice quieter now. He didn't stop. "Yes." I hesitated, not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, but because I knew once I said it, there was no pretending this was just a massage anymore. "You can be honest with me," I said slowly. "This still feel like part of your job?" That did it. His hands stopped, not abruptly, just still. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped back. The sudden loss of contact made my chest feel weirdly empty. I turned slightly, looking up at him. And for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look completely in control. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on me, sharper than usual. Not guarded exactly, but focused in a different way. "You're crossing a line," he said. His voice was low. Not angry, but not neutral either. I held his gaze. "Am I?" A beat of silence. Then, "You asked me to help you," he said. "I did. And now?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "I should stop," he said. But he didn't move. Didn't step away. Didn't break eye contact. And that was all the answer I needed. I stood up slowly. Now we were face to face. The height difference was obvious up close. He still had a few inches on me, but for the first time, it didn't feel like he had the upper hand. Because whatever this was, it wasn't one-sided. "You don't look like you want to stop," I said quietly. His expression didn't change much. But I saw it. That flicker. That hesitation he couldn't fully hide anymore. "You're my responsibility, Colin." The way he said my name. It did something to me. Yeah, I said, stepping just a little closer. And right now, I let the words hang, watched his reaction carefully. Right now, I'm just a guy asking for a little more than a massage. That was the moment everything tipped. I saw it happen. The exact second he stopped fighting it. His shoulders shifted slightly. His breathing changed subtle, but there. And his eyes dropped for just a fraction of a second. To my lips. Then back up. Colin, he said, quieter now. A warning. Or maybe a question. I didn't answer. I just held his gaze. And waited. He moved first. Not fast. Not reckless. Deliberate. Like everything else he did. His hand came up not to pull me in. Not to grab, but to rest lightly against my shoulder. Firm enough that I felt it immediately. Grounding. Steady. But not distant anymore. Last chance to stop, he said. I shook my head. Not taking it. Another pause. Short this time. Then his grip tightened just slightly. And that careful distance he'd kept for months finally disappeared. The first thing I noticed was how controlled he still was. Even now. Even after that line had clearly been crossed. Daniel didn't rush. Didn't pull me in like this had been building up for months, even though, if I was being honest with myself, it probably had. His hand stayed on my shoulder. Steady. Grounding. Like he was giving me one last moment to change my mind. I didn't. And I think he knew that. He let out a slow breath. Then his hand shifted, sliding slightly from my shoulder to the back of my neck. Not forceful. Just there. Guiding. The kind of touch that made it impossible to ignore how much bigger he was, how easily he could take control if he wanted to. But he didn't. Not fully. Not yet. You don't make things easy, he said quietly. I almost smiled. Wasn't trying to. That's the problem. There was no real frustration in his voice. Just something heavier. Tighter. Like he'd been holding this in longer than I thought. We were close now. Close enough that I could feel his breath. Steady but deeper than before. Close enough that if either of us moved just an inch, it would happen. And suddenly all that confidence I had a minute ago is shifted. Not gone. Just different. More real. Daniel, I said, softer this time. Not teasing. Not pushing. Just saying his name. And that did it. He closed the distance. Not in a rush. Not aggressive. Just inevitable. The kind of moment where it doesn't feel like a decision anymore, just something that was always going to happen eventually. His forehead brushed mine first. A pause. Like he was checking one last time. I didn't pull away. So he didn't either. The kiss wasn't what I expected. It wasn't rough. Wasn't desperate. It was controlled just like him. Slow. Measured. Careful in a way that made it hit harder than anything rushed ever could. And that's what got me. Because for someone who always kept distance, this felt intentional. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. My hand came up almost without thinking, catching lightly on his shirt, grounding myself the same way he had done to me. For a second, I thought he might pull back, reconsider. But instead, his grip at the back of my neck tightened just slightly. Enough to keep me there. Enough to say, don't overthink this. When we finally pulled back, it wasn't far. Just enough to look at each other. And yeah, that was new. Because Daniel didn't look unreadable anymore. There was something there now. Something I hadn't seen before. You're still under my protection, he said quietly. I let out a small breath, half a laugh. That your way of saying this is a bad idea? It's my way of saying it complicates things. Everything about my life is complicated, I replied. You already knew that when you took the job. That got a reaction. Subtle, but real. He studied me for a second longer. Then his hand dropped from my neck, though he didn't step away completely. Not like before. The distance between us now was different, less professional, more charged. You're going to regret this if it goes wrong, he said. Or I'll regret it if I pretend it didn't happen. I shot back. A beat. Then, you always this stubborn? He asked. I smirked slightly. Only when I'm right. For the first time since I'd known him, Daniel almost smiled. It wasn't big. Barely there. But it was enough to make my chest tighten in a way I wasn't prepared for. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like just tension anymore, or curiosity, or even attraction. It felt like something that had been building quietly in the background, finally stepping into the open. And the craziest part? The massage I'd asked for? I'd completely forgotten about it. We didn't move right away. That was the strange part. After everything, the tension, the kiss, the words hanging between us, you'd think something would happen immediately. But instead, we just stood there. Close. Too close to go back to how things were. Not close enough to pretend this was normal. Daniel was the first to step back. Not far. Just enough to create space, like he needed to breathe or think, or maybe just remind himself where the line used to be. I watched him, trying to read him again. Old habit. But it didn't work the same anymore. Because now I knew there was more under the surface. "You should sit," he said after a moment, his voice steadier again. I raised an eyebrow. "You going back to being professional now?" "I'm trying to finish what you asked for," he replied. There was something almost dry in the way he said it. And yeah, that made me smile. I sat back down on the couch. But this time it felt different. Before, I'd been tense from the day. Now, it wasn't tension. It was awareness. Of him. Of everything. He moved behind me again. But this time, when his hands found my shoulders, nothing about it felt neutral. The same firm pressure. The same controlled movements. But now every touch carried something extra, something unspoken. Something we were both fully aware of. And it changed everything. I exhaled slowly, letting my head dip forward again. "Still tense?" he asked. "Not in the same way," I said. I could practically feel the shift behind me. That slight pause. That almost reaction he kept trying to suppress. His hands worked lower, slower this time. Not rushed. Not hesitant either. Just deliberate. Like he wasn't pretending anymore. And honestly, neither was I. "Daniel," I said again, quieter. "Yeah." I hesitated. Then, "This doesn't feel like part of the job anymore." A beat. Then his voice, low and even. "It isn't." That should have made things awkward. Complicated. Maybe even uncomfortable. But it didn't. It just confirmed what was already there. I leaned back slightly without thinking. Not fully. Just enough that my shoulder brushed against him. Testing. Feeling. Waiting. His hands stilled for a second. Then one of them shifted, resting more firmly against my side. Steadying me. Not pulling away. Not correcting the distance. Just accepting it. That small contact sent something through me I wasn't ready for. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just real. And that was somehow worse. Or better. I wasn't sure anymore. "You're quiet," he said. "So are you," I replied. "Someone has to think clearly." I let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. "You still trying to be the responsible one?" "I don't get the option not to be." I tilted my head slightly. "You did a pretty bad job of that 5 minutes ago." That finally got a reaction. A quiet exhale behind me. Not quite a laugh, but close. His hands slowed again. Not stopping this time. Just easing the pressure. Like the moment was shifting into something softer. Less about tension. More about whatever this was turning into. "Colin," he said after a moment. There was something different in his tone again. Not warning. Not distant. Just honest. "Yeah. This doesn't stay simple." I swallowed slightly, staring ahead. "I don't think anything about you was ever simple." Silence. Not heavy this time. Just full. His hands finally moved away. And yeah, I noticed it immediately. That absence again. But this time it didn't feel like something ending. More like something pausing. I turned my head slightly, glancing back at him. "So what now?" Daniel held my gaze for a second. Long enough that I knew he was thinking it through. Really thinking. Then he said quietly, "Now we figure out what this actually is." And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel like I needed to push anything. Because whatever was happening between us, it wasn't going anywhere. The weirdest part wasn't what happened between us. It was what came after. Because nothing really changed. At least not on the surface. The next morning, Daniel was already up before me, like always, coffee ready, phone in hand, calm, composed, completely back in that quiet, controlled version of himself. If someone walked in, they wouldn't notice anything different. But I did. "Morning," I said, walking into the kitchen. He glanced up. "Morning." Same tone, same posture. But his eyes lingered a fraction longer than usual. And that was enough. I leaned against the counter, watching him for a second. "You always act like nothing happened?" I asked. He didn't react immediately, just took a slow sip of his coffee. "Something did happen," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "That's kind of my point." A pause. Then he set the cup down and looked at me properly. "It happened," he said calmly, "but it doesn't change everything overnight." I tilted my head. "So what, we just pretend?" "No." That was quick, firm, and yeah, that got my attention. He stepped closer. Not too close, but not distant either. "We don't pretend," he continued. "We just don't rush into something we haven't defined yet." I let out a small breath. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're negotiating a contract." That almost got that almost smile again. I studied him for a second, then nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "So what is this, then?" He didn't answer right away. Typical. But this time it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like he actually cared about getting it right. "You tell me," he said finally. I blinked. "That's not helpful." "It is," he replied. "Because you're the one who pushed this forward." Fair. Annoying, but fair. I crossed my arms, thinking. And that's when it hit me. Not some dramatic realization. Just something simple. Honest. "I don't want it to go back to how it was," I said. The words came out quieter than I expected. But they felt right. Daniel watched me closely. No interruption. No immediate response. Just listening. "I got used to you being around," I continued. "But not like just doing your job. I mean you." I hesitated for a second, then added, "And now I know there's more there." Silence. But not empty. "And?" he asked. That one word. Low. Careful. "And I don't want to ignore it," I said. There it was. No jokes this time. No teasing. Just the truth. Something shifted in his expression again. Subtle but real. Like he'd been waiting to hear that. "This complicates my job," he said. I sighed. "You keep saying that." "Because it matters." "And what do you want?" I asked. That stopped him. For the first time, he didn't have an immediate answer. His jaw tightened slightly, like he wasn't used to saying things out loud like this. Or maybe he just didn't let himself. "I don't ignore things," he said finally. Not exactly what I asked, but close enough. I stepped a little closer, careful this time, not pushing, just meeting him halfway. "Good," I said quietly, "because neither do I." Another pause, but this one felt different, lighter, like we'd actually crossed into something new. Not uncertain, just undefined. "Come here," I said before I could overthink it. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "That an order?" I smirked. "Suggestion." He hesitated for half a second, then stepped in. This time, when we closed the distance, it didn't feel like a mistake, or a question, or something we were testing. It felt like something we were choosing. There was something different this time. Not the closeness, not the tension. That had already been there. But now it felt steady, like we weren't balancing on the edge of something anymore, we had already stepped over it. Daniel's hand found my wrist first. Not grabbing, not stopping me, just holding, like he needed to ground the moment before it went any further. "You don't hesitate, do you?" he said quietly. I shrugged slightly. "Only when I'm unsure." "And now?" I met his eyes. "I'm not." That seemed to settle something in him, because this time, when he moved closer, there was no pause. His hand slid from my wrist to my side, steady and firm, pulling me just enough that there was no space left between us. And yet, that felt different, more real than before. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," I murmured. I'm making sure it doesn't fall apart, he replied. Not everything has to be controlled. His jaw tightened slightly at that. Some things do. I shook my head a little, a faint smile pulling at my lips. And some things don't need to be. For a second I thought he'd argue, push back, rebuild that distance he always kept so carefully in place. But instead, he just looked at me, really looked, and then, that control slipped again. Not completely, but enough. His hand shifted slightly at my side, holding me a little closer, a little more certain this time. And when he leaned in again, it wasn't cautious, it wasn't testing, it was intentional. I exhaled softly against him, my hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath my palm. For someone so controlled, his heartbeat wasn't, and that did something to me. Still thinking about all the complications? I asked quietly. Yeah, he said. I waited. He didn't pull away, didn't create distance. But I'm not walking away from this, he added. That was new, clear, direct, no hesitation. I nodded slightly, my fingers tightening just a little against his shirt. Good, I said, because I'm not either. There it was again, that almost smile, barely there, but real. Then we take it slow, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You sure you know how to do that? I know how to do things properly. I let out a quiet laugh. Yeah, that sounds like you. But honestly, I didn't mind, because for the first time since this started, it didn't feel like I had to push him. He was choosing this too, and that changed everything. Come on, I said after a moment, stepping back slightly. You owe me a proper massage. Remember? He looked at me, then at the couch, then back at me. You're not letting that go, are you? Not a chance. A brief pause. Then he nodded once. Sit. Same word as before. Same tone. But this time, it didn't feel like an order. It felt like something we both understood. And as I sat back down, feeling his hands settle on my shoulders again, there was no confusion left. No uncertainty. Just the quiet, steady realization that whatever this was, we were already in it. This time, I didn't overthink it. I just sat down, rolled my shoulders slightly, and let out a slow breath. And when Daniel's hands settled on me again, it didn't feel new anymore. It felt familiar. You're still tense, he said. Maybe I like having an excuse, I replied. I didn't need to see his face to know he caught that. You don't need one, he said. That made me pause, because there was no teasing in his voice, just honesty. His hands moved slowly, working through the tension again, but this time, there was no hesitation in him at all. No second guessing, no pulling back. Everything about his touch felt grounded, certain, like he'd already decided where he stood. And that changed the way I reacted too. I wasn't testing him anymore, wasn't pushing just to get a reaction. I just let myself feel it. Daniel, I said after a while. Yeah. I tilted my head slightly, glancing back at him. You always this serious? A small pause. Only when it matters. That's your answer to everything, isn't it? It's usually the right one. I huffed a quiet laugh, then looked forward again. But this doesn't feel serious, I said. His hands slowed slightly. No, I repeated. It feels easy. That word hung there for a second, and I could tell it landed, because his hands didn't stop but they softened. Just slightly. That's rare, he said. What? Something that feels easy but isn't simple. I nodded a little. Yeah, exactly. For a moment, neither of us said anything. But it wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was just quiet, comfortable. And that surprised me more than anything else. Because I wasn't used to that. Not with someone like him. Not with something like this. His hands finally slowed to a stop, resting briefly against my shoulders before pulling away. And this time, I didn't feel that empty drop. I turned toward him, leaning back slightly against the couch. So, I said, studying him, was that part of your professional training too? He crossed his arms lightly, looking down at me. Some of it. I smirked. I'm going to assume the rest wasn't. That would be a safe assumption. I held his gaze for a second, then said, quieter. You're different. That caught him off guard. Just a little. How? He asked. I shrugged. Less distant. He didn't answer right away, but he didn't deny it either. That's not something I usually am, he said. I noticed. A small pause. Then I added, I don't think you mind it as much as you think. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in a bad way. Just considering. Maybe not, he admitted. That felt bigger than it should have. Just 2 words. But coming from him, it meant something. I stood up slowly. This time there was no tension in it. No uncertainty. Just intention. We ended up close again. Not by accident. Not because one of us pushed it. Just because neither of us stepped away. You're still figuring this out, aren't you? I said. Yeah. At least you're honest. I don't see the point in pretending. I nodded slightly. Good. There was a moment there. Quiet. Steady. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel like I had to do anything. Didn't have to push. Didn't have to test him. Because whatever this was, it was already moving on its own. And honestly, that felt better than anything else. It didn't turn into something dramatic. No sudden declarations. No big, overwhelming moment where everything changed at once. That's not how it happened with Daniel. It was quieter than that. Steadier. We stayed like that for a while, just standing there, close, not touching, but not distant either. And for once, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. I should go over your schedule, he said eventually. I blinked, then let out a small laugh. Seriously? He raised an eyebrow. What? We just had a moment, and you're talking about my schedule? It's part of my job. I shook my head, smiling. You're unbelievable. But the thing was, I didn't mind, because that was him, and now I understood it better. All right? I said, stepping back slightly. Go on, then. He picked up his tablet, scrolling through something, completely composed again. But not fully. I could still see it. That subtle shift. Meeting at 11, he said. Interview at 2. Dinner at... I walked past him, brushing his arm lightly as I did. Not accidental. Not subtle. He stopped mid-sentence. Just for a second. Then continued. 7. I smirked to myself, grabbing a glass of water. See, I said. Not as in control as you think. I'm in control, he replied calmly. Sure you are. He looked at me then. Really looked. And yet, that look had changed. Careful, he said. Or what? A pause. Then, quieter. You're testing me again. I leaned back against the counter, meeting his gaze. Maybe. Another one of those moments. The kind that didn't need anything added to it. Then he set the tablet down. Walked over. Slow. Direct. No hesitation. And stopped right in front of me. You said you didn't want to ignore this, he said. I don't. Then don't turn it into a game. That hit. Not harsh. Just honest. I nodded slightly. Fair. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I said, quieter. I'm not playing. That was all it took. His expression softened just a fraction. But enough. Good, he said. And this time, when the distance between us disappeared again, it didn't feel like crossing a line or breaking a rule. It just felt right. Not rushed. Not messy. Not something we'd regret in the morning. Just 2 people who finally stopped pretending nothing was there. And honestly, that was more than enough. I didn't know exactly what this would turn into. Didn't know how complicated it might get. Didn't know how we'd balance everything that came with it. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to figure it all out in advance. Because Daniel was still there. Steady. Careful. Real. And now, not distant anymore. And me? I wasn't pushing. Wasn't testing. Wasn't trying to force something to happen. I was just there with him. And somehow, that felt like the best place I could be.